That's one of the benefits of the process we walk people through is we're not just putting their ideas on paper, but we're helping them strengthen that strategy. In business, when working with analysts, they like to think that data and logic should win all arguments. We're human creatures, right? We've been telling stories, for our entire existence. And that storytelling is built into our DNA. So what we do is help them marry the data and logic with the storytelling to be able to influence their audiences.
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by WriteForMe, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Business Ninjas. I'm here today with John Polk, president at John Polk Associates. John, how are you today?
Doing well today. Thanks for having me, Andrew.
My distinct pleasure. Appreciate you spending some time with us on Business Ninjas. Please tell us a bit about yourself and about John Polk Associates.
Sure. So in my first career, I worked at Capital One. I led strategy and analysis teams across the company. In that role, I did a lot of presentations. And I got tired of fixing other people's bad slides. So that led me to create a workshop to teach them how to do better slides. It was really a selfish motive, but that grew into a full day workshop. I had to add other people, teach other people how to teach it to keep up with demand. It became an official Capital One University workshop. When I left, we had taught over 10,000 associates on a skill that's critical for most roles.
Gotcha.
And so I left Capital One 8 years ago to start a consulting business around that topic, the topic of creating and presenting presentations. So it's a classic example where a passion project became a second career.
Gotcha. Everyone's presenting today. You don't have to be a salesman to be selling. Everything at some point, whether it's the beginning of a relationship or somewhere down the road, it's all in effect selling yourself, your idea, your energy, your services, your products. So yeah, I applaud the approach. Who are your clients? What sort of verticals are you servicing at this point?
Yeah, we're really all over the place. Naturally, I have a lot of clients in the financial services space because that's where my network is. But we've got health companies that are clients. We've got startups that are clients. I'm helping a colon surgeon with a presentation for a conference that she's presenting at.
Yes, well, that's a delicate subject.
It's an interesting challenge, right? How to have that topic.
There are too many puns to investigate in that. I'm going to leave them all on the table. It's rare for me, but I'm going to leave them on the table. Aside from the basics of helping people understand how to pitch and that connective tissue that you have to find between you and your potential clients, what are the most common problems you're solving for your clients?
In big organizations, clients have several problems. And I've got an engineering background. So I think I look at the world and I say, how can we make it more efficient and how can we make it more effective?
Okay.
In the effective space, it's all about they go to create a presentation and they realize they don't have a clear strategy. In fact, that's one of the benefits of the process we walk people through is we're not just putting their ideas on paper, but we're helping them strengthen that strategy. There's not good storytelling. In fact, in business, when working with analysts, they like to think that data and logic should win all arguments. Well, we're human creatures, right? We've been telling stories, for our entire existence. And that storytelling is built into our DNA. So what we do is help them marry the data and logic with the storytelling to be able to influence their audiences.
Excellent. Any particular segment that you work best with, size company or?
It's always nice to work with the Fortune 500 because they have bigger training budgets. But the real, the best clients are ones that realize that good communication skills are a strategic advantage, right? Whether that's in the sales process, whether you're using presentations to make decisions internally, right? It doesn't take many bad decisions, due to bad presentations to realize that you need to make a change in that space.
Well, I always say that outside perspective is invaluable, right? Most companies, you have a soul, you have a sense of who you are, you've got thought leadership, you're passionate about what you do, hopefully, and you know who your audience is. There seems to be blinders sometimes in terms of that connecting the dots between you and your audience, that just a tiny sidestep in perspective that someone like you could provide. Go, oh, I hadn't thought of packaging our information that way, or our data that way for that matter. Do you have much competition in this space? And if so, what differentiates you? What makes you stand out in the crowd?
Yeah, probably the most obvious competition is in the graphic design space, right? So people again think, oh, I've got a good idea. I just need help putting those ideas on paper. And, you know, that graphic design skill set is critical if you are doing, big audiences, conferences, very public presentations. That graphic design is less important for internal decision making. And so between the strategy and analysis background, the engineering background, we bring a different perspective. And so with the strategy background, we're going to help you see holes in your strategy, not just, see where your slides are weak. And with that engineering background, we bring a really systemic approach. So we start, to a point you made earlier, assess your audience, right? If you don't understand your audience, you're going to miss the mark. Get really crisp about your purpose. Often we're not explicit with ourselves about what our purpose is, and then it's not clear to our audience. And then we have them think through the setting. Virtual is a different beast. The number of people who didn't get the memo that you've obviously gotten around having your camera so your eyes are 2/3 of the way up the screen. We call that the newscaster framing. I think because when COVID hit, it was such a scramble that we've all just said virtual is bad and we have to live with it. But with very simple tweaks, we can reduce the impact that virtual has on our effectiveness.
That actually dovetails into my next question, which relates to COVID. I'm under the assumption that people like you became even more valuable in COVID because, hey, when you meet in person, even if your pitch isn't 1,000%, there is a palpable sense of you and your energy and your expertise that may cut through some flaws in your presentation. But when we go 2D and it's just video and it's Zoom and it's people across the world, now you really have to tighten up because you can't see if you have their attention. They may be drifting off into other tasks. So tell me about the COVID years and the challenges and opportunities for you to grow Polk Associates.
We literally had never done a virtual workshop before COVID.
Wow.
Everything we did was in person. Even today, I much prefer in person. There's not a substitute for being able to feed off the energy from your audience. On Zoom, if everyone's on mute and I tell a joke, I don't know if it landed. I now make a point to say in my workshop, if we're teaching tips and tricks of the software, if there's something that I would teach that would lead to gasps in the audience when we teach it in the real world. So now in my virtual classes, I say, please put your gasps in the chat. So we did have to pivot when COVID hit. Every one of my clients when COVID hit said, let's just wait a couple of weeks and then we'll get everybody back together. And a couple of weeks became a couple of months, and a couple of months became more than that. And so that forced us to go figure out the best practices, right? How do we get the best out of the virtual environment between converting what we know works live to the in-person equivalent, right? If you write on a whiteboard in a workshop, or have everybody put Post-it notes on a whiteboard in an exercise, we can do that through the virtual equivalent. But then how do we take advantage of the handful of strengths that we have in a virtual world? I tell my clients in their decision meetings, there's an opportunity to make your decision making more democratic. In the in-person meeting, presenter with an idea presents their idea. Everybody waits for the senior most person to give their opinion. We actually call that the HIPPO, the highest paid person's opinion.
I'm sure that person doesn't like to be referred to as a but it is what it is.
In the virtual world, we can use polls and chat and whiteboard exercises to get everybody's input before the senior most person can express their opinion and completely sway the group to their ideas.
Oh, it makes sense. Anonymity can lead to more honesty, especially if there's some sort of repercussion to you raising your hand when polled in a big room and you do it quickly.
Right.
Absolutely. Hey, and knowing when there are crickets after you tell a joke that's important feedback.
Exactly.
I haven't seen cricket emojis come up in a Facebook meeting yet, and I'm glad to say that.
Yeah.
Now, over your shoulder is a book called Presentation Pitfalls. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that's just a printout of the cover. The book comes out in September, and it's being published by Wiley. So this is a big bucket list for us. You know, when you talk about content, using content to market, I think of the book as the ultimate content marketing. So it is our calling card. We've put really everything that we teach into the book, and it's organized around 10 traps or pitfalls that we see presenters fall into all the time. So for example, our first chapter is called the Frankenstein trap. The Frankenstein trap happens a couple of ways. One is when we try to take existing content and reuse it for another audience or purpose. The other time it happens is when 5 different people have to get together to collaborate on one deck. And so they're using different templates. They have different styles. Some are more visual than others. Some put a lot more words on the page. And when you bring that together, it looks like Frankenstein's monster. And so we talk about the downside of that and then how to avoid it, right? So in this case, that process we talked about with assessing your audience and purpose, right? When you get a new audience and purpose, going through that process again will help you realize, okay, I need a different slide here to introduce this background because I'm presenting to an audience with less context. Then then there's the process we call sawing off the bolts, right? Once you've collated material from different authors, you've got to work to make the tone and the look and feel consistent so your audience doesn't see the seams and the scars from the process you went through.
Hey, continuity and context are everything. A presentation that is firing on all cylinders in front of one audience may fall on deaf ears one day later if you're just not catering to who's in front of you. Hey, ideal customer profile is not a little term. It's important. It's very hard to connect the dots if you don't know where the end line is. And that's what we're talking about. Now, before the book, how were you telling your story? What sort of role did content play in the growth of John Polk Associates?
Yeah, really, there's what I think of as the classic ways content helps a business, right? There's the getting your ideas out there, the visibility that comes with that. There's the expertise benefit for a couple of reasons, right? One, that hopefully what you say is seen as quality material and expert, but the fact that you've got a library of content lets your audience see that you have some expertise. And then just the benefit of getting back in front of your network. So somebody you hadn't caught up with in years comments on a piece of content, that gives you the excuse to check in with them. That leads to opportunities to work together. The other benefit is forcing us to put our ideas in a different format, forces us to reshape them. Similar to that process of customizing for a different audience or setting. When we customize for, say, the LinkedIn setting or a blog post or an article online, we tell the story a different way. And that fresh set of eyes that we get with the content makes us better coaches. It makes us better teachers. And because we got the writing bug from writing content, that gave us the confidence to take on the book.
Excellent. All right. Look down the road a year from now. What are some things you'd like to be celebrating personally and professionally?
Yeah, I've talked a lot about the book, but the book is all consuming. So we will have a successfully launched book in a year. like good content, that will be not just putting our ideas in the world and helping people, but also helping people find us and bringing new business and helping expand beyond the current network.
Hey, you're rippling the pool far and wide at that point. Please tell us, what's your URL? Where can people find John Polk Associates, and what social media outlets are you using as well?
The URL is pretty simple. It's John Polk and Associates with the "and" spelled out. If you sign up for the newsletter there, you get what we call our placemat. So a friend challenged me to put all the highest leverage things we teach on one page, almost like those old desk calendars, right? We even put the little black triangles in the corner to mimic a thing you would set underneath your keyboard.
Yes,
My
I
daughter
already have to
actually-
remember these things. Yeah.
Somewhere back here, I actually have a laminated version that my daughter did for me as a gift. And so you'll get a copy of that, and it walks through the process and has the highest leverage tips that we teach. And then obviously connecting on LinkedIn is also great too.
Excellent. John Polk, thank you for spending some time with us on Business Ninjas. All the best to you and yours. Continued success with John Polk and Associates. And of course, congratulations on the upcoming release of Presentation Pitfalls.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Be well.